we're currently testing the audio, and you are now live on live on YouTube, but not yet on TV. So currently we're testing the audio. Can we have a talk with Gita for it?
Sure. Hello and welcome to the Nation. Welcome to the Midday Update. You're with me, Elaine Abdullah. Testing, Gita. I'm speaking to Gita Kandia. She's of course an IP expert, and today she's going to help us understand a little bit about the grants that are being given out. Is that all right? Audio?
You need to speak, is it?
Alright, okay. Alright. Elaine?
Yep.
Elaine?
Yep.
Okay. So we are almost beginning. Okay, just stand by, yeah?
Okay, stand by. Stand by, Gita. Hello, and you're joining me, Elena Abdullah, on the Midday Update. We begin the Midday Update with a look at help being extended from the government to local exporters. Now, joining me is Gita Kandia, an IP expert, to help us understand what's being given out. Hello, welcome Gita, welcome to the show. We're streaming live from home, and it's good to have you with us. Let's talk about this MDG grant from Martrade. Now, exporting loan funds, new government grant to the rescue. Less than 5.5 months left for you to take advantage of Martrade's new grant, and Gita is here to sort of help us break it down a little bit more. Small and medium-sized companies, obviously SMEs, we have good news for you. The Malaysian government is providing a reimbursable grant through Martrade for export promotion activities undertaken from the 1st of January up to the 31st of December 2021. This is to help companies increase global sales by undertaking eligible export promotion activities. Let's dive straight into this. Let's look at what's available for grabs. Now, what type of export promotion activities are allowed under this grant, the MDG grant? Help us break this down a little bit more, Gita.
Good afternoon, Elaine. And to those tuning into Bernama, this grant is amazing. It comes at the right time. Martrade, or Malaysian External Trade Development Corporation, is about helping companies, local companies, take their products and services abroad. And like you well said, Elaine, MDG, Market Development Grant, is about developing the market abroad, outside of Malaysia. And this grant that was just issued recently on 14th of July, Martrade issued this grant, allows companies to apply for registration of intellectual property rights, not in Malaysia, outside of Malaysia, so in the international market. Then they also help companies reimburse their spending on advertising and promotion of their products and services abroad, basically for their exports. Then you're looking at financial compensation for cancellation or postponement of trade fairs. And we all know how the pandemic's affected trade fairs and exhibitions around the world. That helps a lot of local companies, SMEs, and two other areas where government is helping is reimbursement of logistics costs for sending Malaysian products abroad, which is great for those who are distributing Malaysian-made products. And lastly, international certification for exports. Those are the 5 areas that the Market Development Grant will help SMEs.
So just a quick recap, the Market Development Grant, or MDG, from Martrade was just recently announced 14th July, which means it opened up again. You said that it was formerly something that has happened before, but now they're reintroducing it, and we're just making it available for more people to be able to, sort of jump on that bandwagon and leverage themselves on the international market. There are quite a number of things that you mentioned that you're able to use these grants for. I think advertising and promotion expenses seem to be something that's crucial in order for us to be able to sort of make our name out there globally, and reimbursement as well on logistics costs. Now let's talk about who is eligible Is anybody who is considered an SME eligible, or are there criteria for you to be eligible for this grant? Let us know.
Yes, there is a criteria. So they break down SMEs to three areas: those in the manufacturing line, those in the trading line, and those in the service industry. And then there's restrictions on the size of the company. So for those in the manufacturing line, annual sales must not exceed 50 million ringgit Malaysia, or the full-time employees must not exceed 200 employees. That's for the manufacturing industry. And then for trading, there must be sales that's not exceeding 20 million, or employees that are not exceeding 75 employees. And similar in the service industry, the sales must not exceed 20 million ringgit Malaysia, and full-time employees must not exceed 75. So you can see that the grant actually helps small or medium-sized companies in Malaysia, but also trade associations, chambers of commerce, or professional bodies. And it's very relevant because a lot of these chambers or trade associations sometimes help their members have trade fairs abroad and exhibitions abroad. And the chambers could have suffered from what has been happening due to the pandemic.
But from what I understand, you would need to be sort of like a member, or at least registered with Matre in order for you to be able to enjoy these grants and facilities. And how complicated is it for you to do that?
Not complicated at all. Martrade, because it's part of the government-linked organization to boost companies to take sales abroad, right? To venture abroad. Registration with Martrade is free. And because it's free, it's a simple online procedure. It's highly encouraged for companies or trade associations to register with Martrade. For examples such as this, where when they do have funds, they then promote the funds to the people. And we work closely with Martrade. Martrade is actually extremely active during the pandemic. They have been having a lot of webinars to help those who are suffering to kind of pivot, find ways to pivot, find areas of grants that are available, and so on. So registration in Martrade should be done because it's not a complex process.
Okay, that's great to know. I think a lot of people sort of feel a little bit overwhelmed with sort of this online registration and whether or not they're going to get feedback. So these are things sort of like niggling, teething problems that people have to overcome. It's like online banking, isn't it? You first hesitant towards it, but then after that, you can't live without it. Now let's talk about the grant amount. How much is the grant for each category? Is there a set limit according to categories? Tell us about that.
Sure. The grant amount differs from different categories. So for example, registration of intellectual property rights. Intellectual property could be various. It could be patents for inventions, or trademarks for brands, or industrial design for design rights. And the cost also differs for each. What is interesting is the grant amount is RM 30,000 per application. And that means per application in a specific country. So it is a very generous grant because not all applications are around 30,000 ringgit. So that's an example for the grant, the reimbursable grant for registration or protection of your IP rights abroad. The grant also helps advertising and promotion, as we talked about earlier, and that is 70,000 ringgit per application again. So again, what does per application mean? It could be per application by one company, or it could be per application per product by one company. So those details still hasn't been revealed yet. So we have to glean more by discussions with Martrade. So a lot of the information is online, and through the application process, you can identify that. Then we have the compensation for cancellation of the trade fair or the exhibition. That is a range. You can claim from 5,000 up to 25,000 ringgit per application for any cancellation loss that you faced. And the other two, and Elaine, logistics costs, some of our clients who are in the trading business or are venturing abroad, they complain about how logistics costs has just shot up in this pandemic because of how difficult it is to get logistics down. And this would be highly, highly helpful. 30% of total logistics costs is reimbursable. And that itself shows that they can't give 100% because that's how expensive it gets. So 30% of total logistics costs not exceeding 40,000 ringgit per application. And the last one, international certification for exports. The reimbursable grant is up to RM 30,000 per application. So it is quite generous
So what
because
is
they're
the
going by
international certification though?
international certification is sometimes if you need to export a product to another country, they require international certification, such as like for Malaysia, CIVM registration, or an electronic product. It could be a CE, the European standards. So there's a lot of international certification for drugs, for electronic products, and so on, which a lot of countries require it before they even allow your Malaysian products to be imported into their country. So that in some industry is mandatory.
Right, okay. Now, of course, we take note that there is a timeline for all this. There are deadlines. Tell us about the deadlines that we should be aware of. When we started off, we said that there's about 5.5 months left. This was something that was an activity that you've done throughout the year of 2021. So how do we break that down? What is claimable? When is it claimable? How do we submit? What is the paperwork or the documentation or supporting documents that you will have to be able to provide in order for you to get these grants, whether it's reimbursable or in advance? How does it work?
It is very time sensitive because this grant helps those who've incurred expenses from January this year until December this year. SMEs or companies that can qualify, it's very important to take note of the deadline. There's two deadlines to remember. First one being 12th of August, which is coming up really soon. That's next month. 12th of August is a deadline for any expenses that you have incurred in those 5 categories from January up to 14th of July when this grant was introduced. So you're looking at the past 6 months of this year, 6.5 months of this year, and that expenses must be submitted by 12th of August 2021. Then you have a breakdown of, okay, moving forward, your future expenses from July 14 till the end of this year. And that has another deadline, but it depends. That one depends on which activity you've undertaken. For example, the deadline is 30 calendar days from the date of the activity started. So, for example, if your activity, if your advertising and promotion or your IP registration was only done in November this year, then it's 30 days from the date of your application, the date of your advertising and promotion. Yeah. So then it's 30 days from the last date of event. So let's say you had an exhibition in Thailand and at that time you could travel. And now with all the lockdown, you can't travel and it's canceled. Then it's 30 days from the date of that event. And for logistics, it's 30 days from the date of the shipment based on the bill of lading, or there's a form called K2 form. And any other things, you always base it back on the date of activity, and it's 30 calendar days from the date of activity. So those are the two deadlines. Looking at 12th of August, which is kind of like really urgent, look into it now. And the second one, which is later.
Yes. Right, so that's one that you should compile as soon as possible because 12th of August is that deadline, and the one subsequently will be 30 days from whatever activity or events that you are involved in. Now, let's quickly talk about where do you submit the application for the grant, what documents are required. Perhaps you can summarize this for us, and before we go into the last one, which is what could delay your application.
All right. So very quickly, it's very easy to apply for this grant. It's a lot of paperwork and your team can definitely help you, but go online. Go to martrade.gov.my/mdg/ or just look on the Google search engine with Martrade MDG. It will surely send you in the right direction. So submit your online application on that website, and it has to be in color. If it's in black and white, then you'll have to do some certification. They need some evidence of you having certified your documents with an external auditor, an external chartered accountant, and so on. And claim documents must be done under the company that has incurred the expenses, right? Or the individual of the company that's incurred the expenses, the director must be directly related to that company. And documents not in English language, and this is very understandable when you're working with export market. If the documents are not in the English language, the English translation is required.
Okay, and then we have the usual documents, your Companies Act, with regards to latest EPF statement, audited financial documents, and whatever that's necessary in order for you to submit. Just have everyone sort of be aware that those are things that are required. So I think the biggest question, if you can summarize, what could delay your application? Because a lot of people think that they have submitted but they have not heard back. Does it mean that they have failed? What's wrong?
All right, first things first is don't miss the deadline. That's a big no. Second one is to double check your documentation to make sure that it's not incomplete and it's not incorrect. If there's inaccurate data that's not substantiated with receipts or evidence that cost has been incurred, then of course you'll face a rejection, and appeal might be difficult. So to have complete documents and to be thorough with your documentation.
Now that sounds great. Thank you so much, Geeta, for sharing that with us. We hope that we'll be able to assist SMEs to be able to reach out globally. If you need further information, just log on to Martrade. You'll find out a lot more information. Ensure, as Geeta mentioned, to ensure that all your documentations are in order, because appeals process always takes too much time and you might get disheartened by that process. Thanks again, Geeta, for joining us here on our remote edition on the Midday Update. Now we'll
Welcome,
move on
Elaine.
to...
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now moving on to our next story. We'll talk about Tokyo. Olympics is just around the corner. Tokyo mission to bring home the gold. Now with the 2020 Olympics, Tokyo Olympics finally upon us. After almost a year-long delay due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the time has come for our 30 athletes to stand up and be counted. Now, the Malaysian contingent comprises 30 athletes. Our 3-medal target includes a first ever gold. Now, so let the games begin and let's bring home that gold. Next, Malaysia's daily COVID-19 vaccination nears record with 446,052 shots. The country's daily vaccination rate rose above the 400,000 dose mark again yesterday, following a sharp dip in the previous day owing to, of course, the national holiday. Now, according to the Special Committee on Ensuring Access to COVID-19 Vaccine Supply, the JKJAV, health workers gave out 446,052 doses of the vaccine yesterday. This is the second highest number of daily vaccinations in the country and just under the record of 460,123 set on the 15th of July. Now, cumulatively, Malaysia has now given out over 15.5 million doses of the vaccine, of which 10.5 million were for first doses. The figure meant that over 45% of the country's adult population is partially protected from receiving one dose of the vaccine, while another 21% have been fully vaccinated. Now, meanwhile, the government has focused on vaccinating the country to suppress the pandemic as the various lockdowns imposed since last year has become increasingly ineffective in breaking the chain of COVID-19 infections. Now, this is primarily due to the emergence of the highly contagious and airborne Delta variant of the disease, which Health Director General Tan Sri Dr. Noor Hisham Abdullah said was able to cause an infection within just 15 seconds of exposure. Imagine that. Now, yesterday, the country added another 11,985 more COVID-19 patients and a record of 199 deaths. Next, the uptick in COVID-19 cases is expected to continue burning through public health resources in the Klang Valley for a few more weeks before cooling off in mid-September. According to epidemiologist Dr. Sanjay Rampal, this followed the projection that 10% of the population would have developed natural immunity to the virus after being infected, while another 50% would be protected after being fully vaccinated. Now, as long as the transmission rates were consistent, a record number of new cases and healthcare utilization, including intensive care unit ICU bed occupancy, would mirror trends within 1 to 3 weeks. Now, the extensive strain on the public health facilities in the area would also last for at least 4 weeks until the end of next month, when the milestone for artificial through vaccination and natural through infection immunity levels was achieved. Now, today, the Chief Secretary Secretary to the government has issued guidelines for the operation of government offices in Malaysia. The National Recovery Plan will take effect from July 26, which includes changes to attendance, service counters, and meetings, which will take place from next week. And he adds, it was in line with Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob's announcement on change in the percentage of staff allowed to work from home in the civil sector. Now, moving on, from this month to September, a total of 14 million doses of the Sinovac vaccine will be sold by Pharma Negara Berhad to interested states and private companies. The Deputy Prime Minister says the sale of the vaccine directly to interested parties had received the approval of COVID-19 vaccines. Supply Access Guarantee Special Committee, which could further expedite efforts to achieve herd immunity earlier than scheduled. Now, he adds that states are also interested in buying directly, for example, Selangor, which has long asked for vaccines to be sold directly to them, but this committee has its own program schedule. And next, Sungai Buloh Hospital has clarified that its forensic department is only involved in handling the collection, storage, and management of COVID-19 patients, as well as non-COVID-19 patients. Now, in a statement, its director, Dr. Kuldip Kaur, says the forensic department is not at all involved in imposing changes on the deceased next of kin. Kuldip says this in response to a WhatsApp audio-visual message which claimed that funeral arrangement fees for the remains of COVID-19 patients amounted to 9,000 ringgit. Next, special counters for recalibration program will be opened at the KLIA2 next week to facilitate the arrangement of sending home illegal immigrants. According to the Immigration Director General, Dr. Khairul Zaimi Daud, the department is discussing with the management of KLIA on opening additional counters and suitable waiting locations for those awaiting their turn. Now, he adds this is followed by increasing number of illegal immigrants coming to KLIA to seek services at the special counters, which could surpass the capacity of the waiting area. Next, Malaysia is currently experiencing the southwest monsoon. Now, this results in a hot and dry climate from now until mid-September. According to the Malaysian Meteorological Department, weather patterns, including the status of heat waves, are constantly being monitored throughout the country, and information is being disseminated to relevant agencies for enforcement action. And now let's move around the globe in bite sizes. In Peru, Peruvian police say that they've dismantled an alleged criminal ring that had charged as much as $21,000 per bed for COVID-19 patients in a state-run hospital, aggravating care in a country hit by one of the world's deadliest outbreaks of the virus. And in India recorded more than 45,000 cases of the deadly black fungus over the last 2 months. Over 4,200 people had died of the fungus. It is a highly aggressive disease, and surgeons have been forced to remove eyes, the nose, the jaw from patients to stop it from spreading to the brain. The Indian government declared the fungus an epidemic back in May. And in the US extends travel curbs at Canada and Mexico land borders through to August 21st. It has extended closure of land borders with Canada and Mexico to non-essential travel, such as tourism, even as officials debate whether they require visitors to have received a COVID-19 vaccine. And over 4 million children in the United States have tested positive for COVID-19 since the onset of the pandemic, while weekly cases surged again after months of decrease. And finally, let's go on to the Tokyo Organizing Committee reports that 10 new COVID cases have been reported in the Olympic Village. Among those who contracted the virus are a foreign athlete, 1 foreign staff member, and 8 other people involved in the Olympics. And the update has brought the total number of those infected since July 1st to 81. And of course, that brings us to a close. That's all for us from the Midday Update. I'm Milena Abdullah. Kita jaga kita. Thanks for staying with us to the end of the session. Bye for now.